Right. So today, we are going to talk about money, banking, and monetary policy. So this is going to be the last chapter for this class. So just a quick review what we have learned, right? So particularly in this module. So in this module, essentially, we are trying to understand government policy. Okay. And so our goal is to understand how government policy can mitigate the fluctuation of our economy, right? But you need to remind yourself, so what we learned in the previous module, so what causes the fluctuation of our economy in terms of GDP and in terms of unemployment rate, right? So usually that's caused by some shocks. And then we say usually we focus on demand shock. And from the previous module, we see there's a room for government intervention, right? And then in this module so far, we have learned fiscal policy. Essentially, so those are government policies. So that use tax, let me write down tax, transfer, or government spending. Right? So they use those things to affect the aggregate demand. Okay, and then eventually, so that's going to change the, mitigate, so yes, mitigate the fluctuation of our economy, right? So that is a fiscal policy. Now, in terms of money or monetary policy, so that's what we are going to do in this class, in today's lecture. So first, we are going to look at the role of money, understand what is money. And then so we are going to understand what is money supply. And finally, we are going to study how the Fed, so actually Fed is a central bank, so they can use open market operation to change monetary policy. Sorry, to change monetary base, and eventually that's going to affect aggregate demand. Or so here we are going to learn how the central bank is going to conduct monetary policy to affect the economy. Right. So that's the roadmap. Okay. Now let's start with the first things. As in the following few slides, we were trying to understand what is money and its role in modern economy. Okay. First, we must recognize money plays a unique and important role in modern economy. So money helps to facilitate the transaction of goods and service. So it's very important. Okay. But what exactly is money? So money is defined as, here's the definition of money: any assets that can easily be used, purchase goods and service. So here actually I highlighted 3 parts of this concept. It is assets. Okay, so this asset used to purchase goods and service. So you can see these assets used to facilitate the transaction of goods and service. And the third, so it must be easily to be used. So that just says, okay, so this is going to be widely adopted by the society. And in this background, so we have a particular form of money. So this probably is a little bit unusual to you. In 1933, so that's after that's after Great Depression. Okay, so essentially the financial market kind of collapsed, and the people lose their confidence toward the financial market. And then in some US towns, like here, so in Pismo Beach, California, the local resident, so they decide to use the Columbus Creek, like we see in this picture, as money, right? And you may feel like this is very exotic, okay? But then, so we need to understand, so what is money? Okay, as long as something can fit into this definition, and then it can consider as money, right? Like, say, for example, in this Columbus scripts, okay? So as long as the resident in this small town, they accept it, so that's fine. So satisfy this. And if they accept this as a way to purchase goods and service, and finally, this is assets, right? Then this is money. So they just say abstract concept of money. Now, before I show you further explanation regarding to what is money, and in particular is its function, so we need to look at a few concepts. Okay? Currency in circulation. So that's cash held by the public, right? So this cash includes coins and the paper bills, like dollar bills, right? And then here, so on the right-hand side, this is a ancient US dollar. So this is 1776, right? So this is 1/3 of a dollar, okay? The other concept is called checkable bank deposit. So those bank accounts you have, so on which people can write checks. So actually, this is more than you can write checks, like on the left-hand side shows. So with a debit card, so you can just do any transaction anywhere almost, right? And then you can just withdraw cash anytime, anywhere, as long as there's ATM or there's a bank. And so this checkable bank deposit, as we are going to see, so this currency in circulation and a checkable bank deposit, so they are very liquid, okay? So they constitute the most important part of money supply, as we are going to see later, right? So by the way, here is the money supply. What is money supply? Money supply is the total value of financial assets in the economy that are considered as money, right? Now, let me explain to you the role of money or the functions, the assets that must satisfy so that it considered as money. In other words, if a financial asset that satisfy or that can serve the functions I'm going to explain to you in the following, and then so you can treat this as money, right? So there are three functions the money must serve. Number one is a medium of exchange. So by the way, in the following slides, I'm going to explain their meanings one by one. Here, I'm just going to list this with just three functions. Second, a store of value. And third, a unit of account. Okay, so those are three functions money must serve. Okay, or in other words, any financial assets that can serve those three functions, then so you can treat this particular financial assets as money. Okay. Now the first function, media of exchange. So this just means something people accept as a payment for goods and a service. Or in other words, so this is a medium to facilitate the transaction of goods and service, right? It's like intermediate. So this is like a tools to facilitate us to conduct business in modern economy, right? So here, I want to emphasize, so asset that's individual acquires for the purpose of trading, okay, rather than their own consumption. What's the difference? So you hold the cash, okay, so you're not holding this for decoration or for other purpose, right? So you hold the cash, simply you want to do the transaction, okay? Sometimes people use the old cash or old currency as a decoration, okay, like frame in the book or something like that. So in that case, that's not money anymore, it's just for consumption, right? Second function of money, store of value. So money is a means of holding purchasing power over time. But what is purchasing power? Essentially, it's your ability to purchase goods and service. The money must allow people to save the income they earn today. And then so they can use the saved income to buy goods and service in future when they need or when they want. Right, so this is the second function. The third function, money must serve as unit of account. What this means, just look at this background picture, right? So essentially you use the money to measuring the cost of orange or cost of apple. And the money need to precisely give you certain amount of value. Like here's $2.99. Here's $2.99, right? So in the mathematical, you can think about as money first. It can serve as a yardstick. And secondly, so you need this money to be divisible. Right? So what I mean divisible is just somehow so you can make up this 2.99. Right. So as we are going to see, so what this exactly mean by examples. Okay. So those are three functions the money must serve. Okay. So, but the money we see today, or the currency we are using today in modern days, it wasn't always like that. Okay. So in our human history, for thousands of years, so we have used commodity money. Okay. What is commodity money? Commodity money is a good used as a medium of exchange. Okay, so actually this medium of exchange, that's the main function of money. But these goods we use or we adopt it as money, it itself has intrinsic value. Okay. So two examples. On the left-hand side, so we have some cigarettes. There are some prisons, the inmates or prisoners, they decide to use cigarettes, or they collectively decide to use cigarettes, like this background picture shows, as currency. Right? Now is a good time to understand those three functions we just talked about, right? So the three, first is a medium exchange. Okay? So this cigarette, so as long as those prisoners, they accept, so they can use it as a medium to exchange for goods and service in the prison. This is number one. Number two, store value. So these cigarettes, so if you keep them properly, it's going to last for a while, right? Not for years, but at least for months. Okay. Unit of account. So this cigarette, if you look at each of them, so they're almost identical, right? And then, so you can just tell the value of a good and service by counting how many cigarettes you're willing to provide, right? But certainly, so these cigarettes as a commodity value, oh, by the way, so this is the money, so it's because it satisfies the three functions we just discussed, right? And it's called commodity money is because if not used as money, so the cigarette has value, okay, at least for smokers, right? But from this example, you can see there's some limitations for commodity money. So number one, the commodity money, so they have limited supply, right? Because you need to produce cigarette first, right? Number two, so this is not easy to store. Yes, it can store if you keep properly, but what if you live in a humid place, or what if there's a flood, right? So that's going to destroy the cigarette, or you're going to lose the value. Three, so yes, it can count as a unit of account, but what happens if something like some good and service, its value is less than one cigarette? Are we going to cut them in half? Yes, in principle, you can do that, but it's not convenient, right? So in that sense, yes, it is a unit of account, but it's not perfect. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, and then the problem becomes more prominent, right? So right-hand side, so there's some islands, their citizens, the residents use this big round stone as currency. But again, so we can test the idea by looking at those three functions. But again, so this is a commodity money because those big round stone itself has value. Okay, so for example, so you can use for building blocks. Okay, but they're also subject to the limitation we just talked about, right? So you have limited supply, Yes, probably it's easy to store, but it cannot be a good unit account. And furthermore, so there's another limitation or disadvantage. So if you want to do some long distance transaction, it becomes a big hassle to carry the money for you to do your trading, right? So from the discussion, you can see, so gradually, so human society decide to move away from commodity value. And then, so they move to something like this picture shows. It looks like almost identical to the US dollar bill we use today. The difference is that is here. The words written right here. So basically, so this just says, if you have one piece of paper like this, as you wish, anytime, anywhere, you go to the bank, okay, any bank that is legally operating in the United States, so they must, as you wish, they must give you certain amount of silver, right? Or in general, certain amount of precious gold, precious metal. What this means? This just means, okay, so the value of this dollar bill or value of this money is supported by the precious metal you can potentially obtain from a legal bank, right? So actually this is called commodity-backed money. So this is a medium of exchange. Okay, so that's a key function of money. Okay? So different from commodity money. So this commodity-backed money itself has no intrinsic value, right? Just think about what you can do with this piece of paper. I guess only under very extreme conditions, say for example, so we are in a very cold winter and you have run out all of your fuels. And then so you are left with a pile of this cash, okay, to survive. Yes, you can burn this cash to get temporary energy. Other than that, so I don't see much value. Okay? So there's no intrinsic value. And here, its ultimate value will be guaranteed by its ability to convert into some precious metal. Okay, so you can see, so this is a big improvement over a commodity money, because now you're not subject to the limited supply, because to print this piece of paper is fairly easy, right? And it's easy to store, right? Also, this is a good unit of account. Because here, so you can have $1. And by the way, so let's show the earlier picture. This was one picture we show. And then so in this picture, you can see, so there's 1/3 of a dollar. And I still wish you can have 1/100 of a dollar, which is like a cent, right? Okay. So this is a commodity-backed money. But this commodity-backed money is going to subject to the supply of the valuable goods that we decide to support this money. And here, so in history, usually this is limited by the supply of gold. Okay? So that's a big drawback. Just imagine our economy usually is growing, right? From the previous chapter, we know that the US economy, in terms of per capita GDP, has increased 8-fold during the 20th century. Okay, so that just means we need more and more money to facilitate the transaction that happens inside our ever larger economy. Now, with commodity-backed money, any single piece of this paper must be supported by certain amount of gold or silver. So that just means if we have experienced a high growth, and then in principle, that just means you need a lot of money, and then that just means you need ever larger supply of gold. But certainly gold is limited. So that just means, okay, so commodity-backed money eventually will exhaust, right? So that's going to hinder our transaction once the economy keep growing. So then finally, so we move to fiat money. So this go one step further, okay? So this money or this piece of paper has no intrinsic value. And furthermore, so this piece of paper withdraw the right that the holder of this piece of paper can get a certain amount of precious metal, right? And then its value or its ultimate value, it will derive from its official status, or essentially it's a recognition by the government or the reputation by the government. So please make sure you understand the difference. Commodity-backed money, its value is supported by the commodity you can get. But here, so the fiat money, so its value is going to support by the government. Just says, okay, so if you go to the government is going to recognize or to support the legal status. It allows you to get certain goods and service as you wish. Okay, so that is the difference. Okay. And then now the fiat money won't subject to the limitation we have saw in commodity-backed money, because you can easily just simply print. But certainly, so there's a cost of printing this piece of paper, right? First, it is a printing cost, and then secondly, as we are going to see later, usually, so if you print a lot of money, so you're going to create inflation, right? So in that sense, so that's why, so the government usually very cautious about the money they want to print, right? So that's the quick history of money, right? And here there's a quick discussion. I leave that for you to think about. How would the economy be different if we use only local currency? Okay. And so certainly, so that's going to limit the transaction or limit the trade, okay? Or in other words, we won't be able to benefit from the comparative advantage as we discussed earlier, okay? Now, so with this preparation, we can look at money supply. Okay? So here's the definition. Money aggregate is the overall measure of money supply. Okay? Money supply, as we saw earlier, is the total value of money in circulation, right? So in order to get the measure of money supply, so we are going to have different definition of money. Okay? So here we are going to look at M1 and M2, and in reality, sometimes the central bank also look at M3 and M4. But in general, so a higher the number here, and then so there are more general definition, okay, as we are going to see in the next slide. Okay. So on the left-hand side, this is M1 in the US economy in a particular year, right? On the right-hand side is M2. Now let's start with M1, or what is considered as M1, right? Or what we include in the calculation of money supply by using the definition of M1. So essentially, so M1 will include two most liquid form of money. Currency in circulation. Just think about the cash you have in your wallet, the coins you have in your car, or some cash you or your parents leave in your house for emergency. Okay, so those are currency in circulation. And certainly this also includes the currency in the bank. Right? Sometimes they just need the bank just to satisfy the withdrawal requirement from the customer, right? So this currency in circulation. Now, the other one is called checkable bank deposit. We have seen this definition before, right? So essentially, that's your money you can write a check on, right? Or this is money, so you put in a bank and you can withdraw anytime, anywhere as you wish, okay? And there's a tiny small fraction called traveler's check. Some of you may have seen this before, but essentially this is similar to similar to cash, okay? Usually this was used for some long distance transaction. So this is M1. Now what's M2? M2 include M1. So this part goes to here. Okay? But on top of that, so we include some other form of money, but apparently they are less liquid. Okay, so the big chunk we include in M2 is saving deposit. So this is the money you put in a saving account in the bank. It could be short-term deposit or could be long-term, right? And then there are other small amount like a time deposit, money market fund. And so these two, that's the most common definition of money supply, right? So make sure you understand what M1, M2 stand for, okay, and their relationship. But if we consider M3, so that just means you are going to include M2 and consider something more general form. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, yeah, here's the definition, right? M1 includes only the most liquid form of money. M2 includes near money, right? So this is a financial assets can be directly used as a medium of exchange. So remember the currency and a checkable bank deposit, so you can directly use as medium of exchange, right? Because essentially that's going to facilitate the transaction. Or in other words, you can use that to pay for the goods and the service. But M2 is going to include some of the medium exchange that are not ready to convert into cash or checkable bank deposit. So they can be directly used as medium exchange, but they are readily be converted. So we can saving deposit. So in modern days, you can just simply just tap on your phone on your banking account, and then so you can just transfer the money from here to here in seconds, right? And then so immediately you can use as cash. All right, this is M1, M2. So let's look at this practice question. Which of the following assets would you consider as being most liquid? Okay. So this is a good exercise. So first, gold is not liquid. As in old days, when people use gold as money, yes, it is liquid. But in modern days, so gold, no one uses that as money. So in order to use a value in your gold to facilitate the transaction of a good and a service, what we need to do is to sell the gold, right? And then so you can use the money you acquired to buy good and service. So hence this is not liquid. Similar for your house, right? So now sometimes students get confused by these two. So what's the difference? Small time deposit, this is a deposit. So you put in the bank, and usually, say for example, you have 1 month or maybe 2 months, that's fixed, and so you can get your money out after this fixed term. But if you want to use this money before that fixed term, you need to either pay a small penalty or you're going to lose some interest. Right? So this small deposit. So in that sense, is not very liquid. Now, the answer here actually is A, demand deposit. So this is the deposit you have in your bank. And then so you can withdraw cash as you wish. You just tell the bank, and then so you go to pick up the cash, right? So in that sense, this is the most liquid. Okay. Now, after we understand the money supply, and particularly we have seen what is inside M1. Okay, by the way, so we can go back to that slide. Okay, this slide is M1. Okay. So you can see from this chart, M1, less than 50% or less than half are currency in circulation. Okay. And the rest coming from checkable bank deposit. Okay. And then there bears two questions. Question number one. So how we generate money supply? But the answer is obvious. Through this checkable bank deposit or through banks, right? Because this is the very fundamental meaning of money, right? Currency circulation. But the M1 includes a lot more than this fundamental form of money, right? And so this is by checkable bank deposit. So hence, it must be the bank that creates money. This is question number one. Question number two, how the bank generates money, or more specifically, how this happens and how we get these sites, right? So that's the question we need to answer in the following slides. Okay. Here's a big question. How does the banking system create money? Okay. To answer that question, first, we need to understand the business model of a bank. Okay. Banks, they are financial intermediaries. So what they do, so they use liquid assets. Usually it's bank deposit. Think about your money you put in the bank, in your checking account. So with the money from the saver, so the bank will finance the illiquid investment of borrower. So for example, the bank make a loan to a local business, or the bank make loans to homeowners, and usually they charge high interest rate. And then, so the difference between the interest rate they paid to the depositors and they charged to the borrowers, the bank make a profit. Right? So you can see from here, so the bank essentially is a middleman. And now here, so this T account, actually this is called T account. It was a student who had an accounting background, so you're probably familiar with this. Right? So this T account shows you how the bank functions or how the bank do their business. Okay. So the bank, so they have their liability. What is the liability? So essentially what they own, what they owe, right? So the deposit comes from saver. Okay. So whoever save money, right? So the individual save their money, and then put the money in the bank. Right? And the bank issue a debit card or issue a certificate. So this debit card or certificate essentially is a proof of I owe you. Right? Like in this example, so the bank has $1 million of deposit, meaning the bank owes the savers $1 million. So with this $1 million, the bank has a couple of options. Number one, they just put their money, this $1 million in their vault, okay, or in their safe, Number two, so they use money to do some investment. Okay, and certainly the first one is not a good choice because that doesn't bring the bank any revenue or any profit. So in reality, they may just put this money in some investment, like here, so they make some loans, right? So that they can make a profit. But then you may be wondering, what is reserve? So look at here, reserve usually is a fraction of deposit. So this reserve is just the money the bank set aside. Okay, either put in their vault, or as we are going to see later, put in the central bank. Okay, and then why they need this reserve? They just in case the saver or depositor show up in the bank, ask for withdrawing their money, right? But then you may wonder why, so the reserve is only a fraction of deposit. This is because, so once we save our money in the bank, most of the time we don't need them. And even we need them, we just only need a fraction of them, right? And so that just gives the reason why the bank only keep a fraction, right? So we'll talk about this a little bit more. So when we talk about central bank, for now, let's just take this as given. All right, so when I say take it as given, just says, okay, so there's a requirement from the central bank. So ask you to put like here, so put 10% of your money aside. All right, so this is 10% of deposit because this 100K is 1 million, which is 10%. All right, okay, now let's see so how the bank is going to create a money supply. And the answer largely lies into this reserve ratio. By the way, so the reserve ratio is defined by the reserve divided by the deposit. Okay, and here, so this is a T account. Let's see these couple of definitions. T account, so this is from accounting, right? So this is a tool for analyzing a business financial position. And the bank reserve, this is the currency the bank holds in their vaults, plus their deposit at the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve here actually means central bank, or you can call it the banks, the bank for the banks. Okay, so there's two definitions. And the reserve ratio is a fraction of bank deposit that a bank holds as a reserve. Use this number divided by this number. For the moment, let's just take this as given. And later, I'm going to explain to you why there's a requirement for reserve ratio. Now, from here, so we already understand, so the bank essentially work as a bridge between lenders and the borrowers. So the bank is going to channel through the money from those who has to those who need, right? And now, so we are ready to understand how the bank is going to create money supply. To understand that, let's look at a simple example. In our economy, I mean, in this example economy, there's an individual. His name is Silas. Okay. And usually he keep his cash at home and put in a shoebox and then hide under his bed. Okay. So for example, he has $1,000. Okay. So if he doing that, keep doing that, and then so the money supply is going to be 1,000. Okay. Now, say for example, there's a bank, and Silas decides to engage with the bank. Now let's see what happened. So this 1,000, it will go to the checkable deposit. So this checkable deposit belongs to Silas. So it belongs to Silas. And this checkable deposit essentially just says the bank owes Silas $1,000, right? So before the bank make any new loans, so the bank has a reserve. Okay, so this reserve just show off as cash in the bank's vault, right? So to follow that, so this $1,000 of cash first goes to here, and then goes to here. Right? So this is the initial step. But certainly, the bank won't sit on this cash. So they are going to lend out. But how much they're going to lend? So remember, we have a reserve ratio of 10%. So that means the bank is allowed to lend out 90% of the reserve they just got. Okay. And then, so what happens? For the bank, so their reserve is going to reduce by 900. And this reserve, or in other words, the cash they sit on will go to loans, right? The loans go to someone who take loan, or the borrowers. Okay, so the borrowers will have $900. Okay. Now we can use this big table to understand the role of bank in this money supply generating process. This is where we start. Silas keep cash under his bed. Currency in circulation is 1,000. No bank account. Money supply equal the summation of these two, 1,000. Second step, Silas deposit cash in First Street Bank. Okay. So this 1,000 goes to here, right? So now Silas has a bank account. But then the bank is going to lend out $900. So this $900 comes from here, right? And then, so this $900 was lent to Maya. Maya withdrew the cash of 900, paid to N. So you can see, so now N, so actually let me write down, N has $900 of cash. Silas has $1,000 of checkable bank deposit. Okay? And then, so the summation of these two give you 1,900. So now this process will keep moving. And so she will deposit her money into second bank. Okay, so this 1,900, so includes Silas 1,000 in First Street Bank and Ann's 900 from Second Street Bank, right? But plus, so the Second Street Bank with $900 of deposit from Ann, so the bank is going to lend out 90% of the 900 deposit coming from N, goes to another borrower. The another borrower has cash, and then so the another borrower either can keep the cash or can put the cash in the bank. So you can see this process keep moving. So you can see the money supply will grow. Okay. This is very similar to the multiplier of consumption we have seen before, right? Now here, to understand the total multiplier, so first we need to look at excessive reserve. What is excessive reserve? So this is the bank's reserve. That is more than what is required, right? So what this means, go back to this example. And then particularly, oh, maybe maybe go to here, okay? So initially, Silas put $1,000 in the bank. Before bank do anything, the reserve is 1,000. And then the required reserve says the bank must leave aside 10%. Okay, and then so the bank is free to lend out 900 or 90%, or invest these $900. Excess reserve means the bank may just set aside 20%, meaning they only lend out $800. Okay, but then so from the basic economic analysis, the bank won't do that. Okay, because if they just keep $200 instead of $100, they lose the opportunity of investing $100. Now, so that's not a profitable thing to do, and that's not rational to the bank. Okay, so that just says, so as long as the bank are rational, or as long as we are in the normal circumstance, the bank don't want to hold excess reserve. They always want to lend out what they can lend out. And then so in the example we just had, so the total money supply will equal to 1,000, that's Silas' initial deposit. And then including the second term, so the 1 minus reserve ratio, so that's the amount the bank can lend. So in the example, so bank lend to, let's go back, previous one, because I forgot the name, lend to Maya, okay? So this goes to Maya. And Maya pays to Anne. And Anne used the money to save in Second Street Bank. So that's the second term. Now the third term, Second Street Bank has this amount of new deposit from Anne. Remember, so Anne's money comes from Maya. Maya's money comes from bank. Bank's money coming from Silas. Okay, so now Second Street Bank has this amount of new deposit, and then they are going to lend out this money, this amount. And this amount goes to the fourth person in the story. And the fourth person either keep in cash or deposit in the third bank. So you can see this process is going to keep moving. Now you can see the key to understand the summation of this formula is the reserve ratio. Right? So the simple algebra tells us the total money supply will equal to 1,000, which is the original amount, divided by reserve ratio. Okay, so again, so this is very similar to the multiplier we discussed earlier. And here, so we can understand the intuition by thinking about two extreme cases. If reserve ratio equal to 1, and all this pair is going to disappear, all these terms will disappear. It's very intuitive, because now the bank is required to keep all the savings they have in their vault. They are not allowed to lend out a single penny. And then the banks will lose the ability to generate money. Hence, the money multiplier equal to 1. So that's always equal to the initial amount. Now go to other extreme. If reserve ratio goes to 0, so now the bank's ability to generate money supply will become to infinity. Simply because, so the bank can lend out all the money they have. So this 1,000, another 1,000, and this is going to keep moving and forever, right? So then from this discussion, you can see the higher the reserve ratio, the smaller the money supply, vice versa, right? Okay, now let's look at this practice question. Okay, so in these questions, there's a table. It shows the bank's business. And here we assume the bank has no excess reserve, meaning so the reserve exactly equal to the required reserve, right? And then from here, so the question asks you to calculate the required reserve. So that equal to the required reserve divided by deposit, that equal to this number, 100 divided by 1,000, right? So that equal to 0.1%. Okay. There are two small notes I want to say about this example. First, so this number on the asset side doesn't equal to the number on the liability side. Okay, so this is not a perfect example, but in reality, usually this must equal to each other, right? So your assets must equal to your liability, okay? But this is just for illustration, okay? So secondly, so from here you can see, so how the bank do their investment. So they have required reserve, they set it aside, and then they can make loans to customers. Could be business, could be homeowners. And they also invest in treasury bills. What is treasury bill? That is government bond. Or in other words, that's the form how government borrow. The government borrow, pay interest. And then the bank lends to the government by purchasing treasury bills. Okay, and then make an interest income. But usually this interest income is higher than the interest they need to pay to the depositors. That is how the bank makes a profit. Okay. Now let's look at another practice question. Suppose the required reserve ratio initially is 10%. Now it increased to 20%. Here's the increase by Fed. So here Fed, again, that refers to Federal Reserve Bank. And that's the central bank for the US. So this question asks you, holding everything else constant, this will, okay, how would that affect our monetary system? A, reduce the size of money multiplier. So we can calculate the money multiplier, right? So the money multiplier equal to 1 over the reserve ratio. So it increased from 10 to 20%. The money multiplier will decrease from 1 over 0.1 equal to 10 to 1 over 0.2 equal to 5. So A is correct. B, cause the banking system to contract the level of bank deposit in the banking system. So actually this means, so the bank is going to lose part of their capacity to generate new bank deposit or new money supply. This is also correct. C, that's what we just calculated, right? From 10 to 5. So the answer should be D. Great. To summarize, right, so what have we learned? So the bank reserve, right? Currency in circulation and a checkable deposit. So this currency in circulation and a checkable bank deposit. This is what we call M1, right? Now, what is bank reserve? The bank reserve essentially is the money the bank set aside, right, for each deposit they attract, right? And usually this bank reserve put in the vault or will deposit in the Fed, right? So they are not in circulation, but that is a core part of money supply. And we define this as monetary base. The reason why we call this monetary base is essentially these two parts, they are under the control of the central bank, which is the Fed. Okay? Because the Fed, first, they can decide how many currency in circulation, because all the currency was mint or was produced or was printed in their mint, right? And then the bank reserve, that's a requirement coming from the Fed or the Federal Reserve Bank or the central bank. Okay, so you can see this two is going to give you the monetary base and is under the control of the Fed. And actually the Fed can affect M1 or the money supply via monetary base, right? So there are two ways. Number one, so they can increase the size of currency in circulation by printing more cash. This is number one. Number two, so they can adjust the required reserve ratio. So that's going to change the size of here, right? But once they change the size of here, so this is going to change this accordingly, because this let me erase everything. So the bank reserve is proportional to checkable bank deposit. So if the reserve ratio, if this increase, and this is going to increase, and this is going to decrease. On the other hand, if reserve ratio decrease, and then so this is going to decrease, but this is going to increase. So you can see how the central bank can control the money supply, okay, by adjusting here and here. And both is called monetary base, right? So I want to emphasize in reality, the actual determination of money supply is a little bit more complicated. It not only depends on the ratio of reserve or the required reserve ratio, it also depends on the individual, their decision. Like, for example, if the individual decide to hold all their saving in the form of currency or in cash, and then the deposit is going to disappear, right? If nobody hold cash, and then the money supply process will go as what we discussed in the example. But in reality, actually, people will hold some cash. Or in other words, in the previous example, Silas most likely, he probably deposit 900 to the bank and keep 100 as cash. If that's the case, and then so you can do the same calculation. So you're going to see the money multiplier is going to be much smaller. Okay, to summarize, the money multiplier is a ratio of the money supply to the monetary base, right? And in normal time, the money multiplier is some number between 1.5 and 3. It's much smaller than 10, right? So how we come up with this 10 is because this 0.1, that's the reserve ratio, 1 divided by reserve ratio that gives you the money multiplier. And why is that? It's because people hold significant amount of cash. Okay, so that reduce bank deposit and reduce the bank's ability to create money, right? So from the discussion we have so far, okay, so I hope you can see there's a potential risk embedded in the financial system. Okay. Why? This is because when you deposit your money in a bank, the bank only holds a part or a fraction of its value as cash. And usually it's 10%. Okay. So now what is the risk? Or what is the potential problem? So if you need a cash, you go to the bank, but the bank only have 10%. Okay. But so usually, so this is fine because they're not only one, you are not the only depositors, right? So there may be like hundreds or millions of depositors deposit their money in the same bank, right? So let me just give you a numeric example. So for example, there are 100 individuals like you, like me, and each of us deposit $1,000. And then the total deposit the bank attract is going to be 100,000. Then the required reserve ratio tells us the bank keep 10,000. Okay, this is either in their vault as cash or they put in the regional Federal Reserve Bank. All right, so essentially that's just a bank account for the bank in central bank. But anyway, so they only have 10,000. So that is in immediate access. Even wondering where does this rest $90,000 go? So usually they just lend out. So for example, they lend out to Kiwi, so this construction company, or lend out to MUD, right? And usually this is a longer term business. Now, what happens if you want to withdraw your cash? Okay, so if you are the only person who want to withdraw, that's fine because they have 10,000. So you only need 1,000. So what happened? There's 10 people want to withdraw the cash, also fine, right? Because they have 10,000. And then 10 people is going to have total demand of 10,000. That's fine. Now, what happened if there are 20 people want to go to the bank to withdraw the cash? Then they run into problem. But I want to emphasize usually, so this normally it doesn't happen. Okay? Because most of the time we keep our money in the bank, so we don't need them as much on a daily basis, right? So in other words, usually, so we only need a fraction or only a fraction of people need the cash, okay? But so this risk does exist, and in particular, it will exist when people start to worry about the bank. So if for example, someone heard the news says, okay, so this bank has some trouble, okay? And then so we better just get our cash out of the bank so to avoid the loss. And then the word is going to spread like a virus. So usually the only 5 people want to get the cash or need the cash, or we need only 5% of our cash to do our transaction. Now, because of this bad words spreading like a virus, and everyone want to get their cash out of the bank as possible as they can. So now the bank has trouble. So they only have 10,000, but the total demand can easily exceed this amount, right? Because everyone wants to go to the bank. So they have lent out 90,000, but these 90,000 are not easily cashed in, right? Because those are loans, those are investment. So you can see there's a problem, right? Also, the other problem is, okay, so they make these loans or they do some investment. What happens? Those investment go sour. Or in other words, what happened? They lose part of this $19,000, right? Okay, so to summarize, the banking system will make somebody nervous, or there's some inherited risk in the bank system. Now, how we are going to do? Oh, by the way, so the problem of that is sometimes we are facing bank run. Okay? And the bank run is a phenomenon in which many of the bank's depositors try to withdraw their fund. Why they want to do that? Because they fear a bank fails. If the bank fails, then they are going to lose their deposit. Okay, and then so everyone wants to withdraw. But then so everyone wants to withdraw, so that's going to crash their capacity. So this bank run. But from the discussion we had in the previous slides, so you can see there always is a risk of bank run. Right? Then so to answer or to address this concern, okay, the central bank start to develop, and then they develop some sophisticated regulation to prevent the possibility of bank run or to minimize the damage of the bank run, right? Let's just stop here for the current section, and then we will talk about that in the next time.